Choose your character. World War I edition.
You know, when you look at it, World War I was so petty and pointless. It probably could have been solved with some sort of tournament or something. 2K, Super Smash Bros, foosball, one-on-one. I don't know. Probably a lot better options than war. Well, anyways, let's talk about what actually happened. If you've been following the last few Cain course videos, you know that we're deeply entrenched in World War I. Entrenched. See what I did there? I'm going to attempt to cover almost 3 years of war that ransacked Europe during this time. If you don't remember why this war is taking place, go back and watch the Causes of World War I video. But I'll try to summarize it as quickly and easily as I can. Some Serb dude shot an Austrian guy, and now all of Europe's at war. That's pretty much it. Immediately after the assassination, Austria-Hungary issues an ultimatum to Serbia. Basically, these were demands and regulations that Serbia had to follow, otherwise war would be declared on them. And honestly, these demands were so ridiculous, they never were going to be followed through anyways. Anyways, the key point is that by fall of 1914, all of Europe, whether they like it or not, is at war. And there's two distinct sides. What was the Triple Entente, England, France, and Russia, is now known as the Allies. What was the Triple Alliance, Italy, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, known as the Central Powers. As we've already established, this war is pretty unique in that it has two fronts, or two areas in which this war takes place, the Eastern Front and the Western Front. It's almost like two wars within one big war. It is all connected, but the fighting is very different. Let's break down the Eastern Front first. Obviously, the Serbian situation and everything going on in the Balkans took center stage at the start of this war as the main cause. Therefore, most of the start of the war is focused in the East, or Eastern Europe.
The earliest fighting of World War I took place in Serbia as the Austro-Hungarian Empire invaded Serbia as vengeance for the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Russia and Tsar Nicholas II quickly rushed to the aid of the Serbians, while Germany provided direct military support for Austria-Hungary.
Remember, Serbia itself is pretty tiny. So really the bulk of the fighting takes place between Austria-Hungary and Germany against Russia. While Russia did have the Triple Entente with France and Great Britain, France and Great Britain were focused on protecting France. And part of the Triple Entente meant that Russia would step in to stop the advance of Germany. Germany, remember, has posed a threat to European stability. And for Russia, this was a chance for it to prove that it was on the same level. You may remember that Russia just faced a very humiliating defeat in 1905 to Japan, a much smaller but industrial country. So while Russia tries to legitimize itself and save its face, it's clear that Russia is not at the same level of Germany at the start of the war.
Conflicts ensued between Germany and Russia on the Russian-Prussian border. Germany improved to be industrially more advanced than Russia and quickly defeated Russia at the Battle of Tannenberg early in 1914. While Russia's army was large in size, it didn't have the technological advantages that Germany did, causing it to very quickly lose battles.
Yep, unfortunately for Russia, it's a growing trend in the early 1900s. They lose a lot of battles and they get utterly humiliated. And then they go back home and it's all cold. Kind of a rough time to be living in Russia.
Tsar Nicholas II also led Russia from the front lines directly, which he wasn't really all that equipped to actually do. He was very disorganized and risky, leaving the rest of Russia ungoverned without a czar.
With the czar off fighting his war, which to him was like a game, tensions at home continue to rise as popular opinion of Tsar Nicholas II goes way down. This will actually lead to Russia pulling out of World War I, and a whole other set of circumstances that we'll have to use another video to unpack. The Eastern Front also severely impacted Italy, who you may remember started as a member of the Triple Alliance. But Italy in a lot of ways has a change of heart and switches sides.
Italy felt misrepresented and improperly treated in the Triple Alliance and believed it wouldn't get the land in the Balkans that was promised to them by Austria-Hungary at the end of the war.
They also viewed the actions of Austria-Hungary and Germany as overreactionary and as the aggressors. They quickly fought to the aid of the Serbians and the Russians in the Balkans. Now, granted, there was territory in it for them as well, but Italy has effectively changed sides and shifted the tide of the war. At the same time, the Eastern Front is also characterized by the war with the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans eventually emerged in this war on the side of the Triple Alliance, mainly because Austria-Hungary and Germany promised that eventually they would give the Ottoman Empire some of that territory in the Balkans that had once belonged to them. Germany had also promised to help the Ottoman Empire begin to industrialize, providing them with factories, new weapons, and even ships. Quickly, the Ottomans emerged as a major ally to the Triple Alliance, and became the focus of Britain in the Eastern Front.
The Eastern Front was truly opened up in 1915 with the Gallipoli campaign, during which British imperial forces stormed the Turkish beaches of Gallipoli in an attempt to weaken the Ottoman Empire and gain control of the Balkans. While the operation was relatively unsuccessful, it did demonstrate the power that Imperial Britain had. Bringing in soldiers from Austria and New Zealand, known as the Anzac Corps, Britain was able to establish a foothold in the Eastern Front and continued attempts to take out the Ottoman Empire and push them out of the Balkans and the Middle East in general.
You might be asking yourself right now, why is Great Britain possibly fighting the Ottoman Empire? That's a great question. It's not really clear in geographic sense. But then you might remember that this whole concept of imperialism is going on, and that the Ottoman Empire was located on top of massive oil reserves. Oil was an extremely valuable commodity within the Industrial Revolution because it was being used for fuel for all of these machines. Remember, Great Britain relies on factories, and it's also going to need this fuel in order to literally fuel the war effort. That's why Great Britain is fighting the Ottomans. But Great Britain is also wrapped up in the Western Front, which we'll unpack later. And if you know anything about history, it is hard to fight a war on two fronts.
Rather than fighting this war completely on their own, the British sent in an officer named T.E. Lawrence, who trained and led Arab people in a revolt against the Ottomans. This ensuing Arab revolt led to Ottoman surrender and the eventual fall of the Ottoman Empire itself, as the Arabs utilized guerrilla warfare to take out Ottoman supply line and in turn allow Great Britain to gain control of strategic positions and resources.
There's so much more to this, but it does lead to the eventual fall of the Ottoman Empire and sets Great Britain up for success overall in World War I.
To summarize, the Eastern Front was characterized initially by the fights between Russia, Germany, and Austria over Serbia, but eventually opened up conflicts between Italy and Germany and Austria-Hungary, and also saw Great Britain struggle with the Ottoman Empire for imperial gains and resources in the Middle East.
While the Eastern Front prominently features the causes of World War I, it's generally not what people think about when they hear World War I. The Western Front is much more famous, and typically that's because of the trenches. And when you look at the causes of World War I, the Western Front really isn't connected to those causes. But for Germany, it was.
Remember, Germany's initial strategy, the Schlieffen Plan, involved a two-front war with both Russia and France, leading to Germany's initial invasion of Belgium in order to reach Paris. This was truly a part of Kaiser Wilhelm's II major plan to grow Germany to be a world power. I believe that both Russia and France, who were allied in the Triple Entente, were threats to German growth and German ideals.
Germany is often seen as the big villain of World War I. The Western Front has a much more idealistic goal. Germany is attempting to expand and establish itself, while Britain and France are attempting to stop the spread of Germany and therefore that evil. The Western Front is not only very intense, it goes back and forth, and because of trench warfare, it really results in stalemate. There's no clear winner at this point in the war. What follows is a series of battles that characterize the Western Front. And it's important to note that battles in World War I aren't like a one-day thing. Some of these battles took over a year to complete. Already in your mind, you're probably thinking about the massive casualties that this results in, especially when you connect it with the terrible conditions of trenches and the brutal strategies that were used.
1914 saw the first success of the trenches at the Battle of the Marne, as the French, with support from the British, were able to stop the German advance, protect Paris in the heart of France.
The Western Front is truly a defensive war, as both Britain and France try to stop the spread of Germany and protect Paris. But the Germans kept coming.
Germany continued to attack France, and at the Battle of Verdun in 1916, the French suffered heavy losses. But the French famously stood their ground and chanted, "They shall not pass."
You shall not pass! Wait, you're telling me Gandalf wasn't at the Battle of Verdun? Come on.
While France suffered more casualties, Germany suffered as well, and Verdun was seen as a case of hope for the Allies.
1916, the Battle of Verdun showcased the resiliency of the French and the British, and both armies tried to use this as motivation and momentum to attack Germany.
1916, the Allies also tried to advance on the Germans, but failed miserably at the Battle of the Somme, which was one of the bloodiest battles of World War I, and left both the British and French armies in very weakened states. Britain made another major advance at the Battle of Passchendaele in 1917 and had initial success in the summer, but this advance resulted in yet another stalemate as the rain and mud that ensued in the fall slowed down the British forces and basically ended this campaign.
By 1917, the fiercest fighting on the Western Front is taking place, and there is still no clear winner. If you want to push me to say there was a winner right now, it's Germany. But they really hadn't gotten any closer to Paris, and the Allies hadn't pushed towards Germany either. And while war raged in the trenches, the sea was also turned into a battlefield. At the beginning of the war, Great Britain used its massive navy, the largest in the world, to blockade Germany. And Germany responded by trying to do the same thing to Britain. So there's an intense naval rivalry between Great Britain and Germany over supremacy of the Atlantic Ocean, because whoever controlled that had an economic advantage in this war.
The largest naval battle of World War I was between Germany and Great Britain in the Battle of Jutland in 1916. While the Germans caused more damage to the British fleet, the battle was technically a standoff. But the Germans were forced to retreat, and technically Great Britain did gain control of the Atlantic Ocean and major seaways around Europe.
Germany also had this new invention that they called Unterwasser boats. And for those of you who don't speak German, they are underwater boats. Yeah, submarines.
Germany made use of these U-boats, or submarines, to attack British transport ships and cut off supply lines.
In many ways, the Western Front is the heart of the war. And despite all this conflict and violence, nothing has been solved yet.
So to summarize, the Western Front was characterized by the attempts of the British and the French to stop the German advance into France as a result of the Schlieffen Plan. Neither side was really able to gain or lose land, leading to a clear stalemate on both land and in the seas.
But what about the Americans? Oh man, how could I possibly forget the United States? Oh wait, they're not even involved yet. Classic Americans trying to make it all about us. It's kind of true when you think about it. Now, World War I wasn't the US's war. This is a European war. While the Triple Entente was desperate for American aid, the US stayed relatively out of it until about 1917.
When he was elected president, a key part of Woodrow Wilson's campaign was to not join World War I.
But behind the scenes, Woodrow Wilson slipped some cash and some weapons and some supplies under the table to Great Britain, who was the United States' biggest ally.
But United States trade with Great Britain certainly left it vulnerable. In 1915, German U-boats sank the British ship the Lusitania, which happened to be carrying U.S. civilians on board.
And while this certainly angered the American public, the United States was involved in the war without really being involved in the war. They didn't enter. It took something a little more drastic. Later, Great Britain intercepted a telegram from the leaders of Germany to the leaders of Mexico, a country that has a pretty ugly history with the United States. In it, Germany begged for the support of Mexico in World War I and encouraged Mexico to invade the United States with German help to take back land that was lost to the United States during the Mexican-American War. Obviously, this is almost a declaration of war in and of itself. But we don't necessarily know whether or not this note was real or just actually fabricated by the British because they wanted the United States involved. Regardless, it worked.
The Zimmerman note, combined with the sinking of Lusitania, gave the U.S. the reason it needed to get involved in World War I, and quickly people declared that the U.S. should be involved.
It's like I always say, you mess with the bull, you get the horns. Here comes the United States, and it provides a boost for the Allies that they really needed in 1917.
Just like other states at this time, nationalism was rampant in the United States. Industrialism had provided the U.S. with one of the largest armies and most technologically advanced armies in the world, even using conscription to create a large army ready to participate in the war by 1917. While World War I was not the U.S.'s fight, eventually they found themselves involved. Support for their ally Great Britain, combined with the sinking of the Lusitania and fear of an invasion of the United States after the Zimmerman telegram, ensured that the United States would be fully involved in this war by 1917.
1917 is truly the turning point of World War I. No wonder it got its own movie. And there's a lot that goes on there, so we'll unpack that in our next video. Hopefully this gave you a picture of the actual events of World War I and how massive of a conflict this truly was. Well, it wasn't necessarily a worldwide war in that sense. From around the globe were involved. When you think about it, maybe a little bit of an overreaction to the death of one person. All these countries have other reasons to be involved. And that's why World War I is so dense. That's why there's so many stories within it. People were involved for a variety of reasons. Most of them were rather selfish. And because of this, World War I shows us what happens when nationalism gets out of control. Protect your individual interests too much, you believe in them too much, conflicts occur. And as World War I shows, no one's going to be happy. And the results of those conflicts can be world-changing. But that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.